Good afternoon, and welcome to the Dean's Forum. This is the last Dean's Forum for the academic year, and we will reconvene here again in September, when we come back for the next academic year. Today's topic is an interesting topic for quite an obvious reason, and I try to remind all our listeners and everyone in attendance that the Dean's Forum has been based on national conversations, based on the trends of events happening around the country, and we at Weatherford College, through the Dean's Forum, try to promote the same conversation. So today, we are going to be talking about transgenerational adaptive teaching. In all this, we are going to be talking about what is generational or transgenerational, what is adaptive teaching, what is adaptive learning, and how do we bring all this into perspective. Before I introduce our panel to you, I will say that it is becoming increasingly evident that our colleges are becoming more generational diverse, especially at the community college level. You have students across all generational spectrum, those fresh from high school, those returning after hiatus from college, those coming back for career changes after several years in the workforce, and more, and the list goes on. Each of these students bring their own level of aptitude and experience in the classroom. So the phrase that we quite often, that some of you have heard me say over and over again, that you teach your students and not the subject, is very relevant today in the 21st century as we introduce adaptive learning technology into the classrooms. There is a pedagogical shift tailored to meet the need of each student. Gone is the notion that one-size-fits-all curricular design. There are several adaptive learning technologies out there, using artificial intelligence to assess or gauge students' knowledge, readiness, as well as mastering of concepts. And we are going to be talking about some of those today. So, before I go a little further into some of the definitions, I'd like to introduce our panel to you today. I'm going to start off here with April Stables. She is an instructor with behavioral sciences for Weatherford College. I do have Romney Landis. She is the department chair for behavioral sciences. I do have Adrianne Treinies. She is professor of English with the Humanities. And I have Cheryl Rodriguez. She is our LMS administrator. And over here next to me is Dr. Norma Jones. She is my handwriting person. She is our guru in technology and critiquing and making sure everything falls in place. So, that being said, I will let Dr. Jones, would you want the panel members to give introductory, or you want to just start with the poll first?
Let's get started. Let's get the polling board first, and then if that's okay?
Yes.
All right, folks. So presenters. All right, so we'll do setting up everything. We'll talk. So this is one of those talks where you take out your cell phones and you use it during the talk.
So if you have your cell phone, some of them left their cell phone in their
I know, right? So you want to text Norma Jones 387 and text it to 37607, and you should get the acknowledgement you've joined Norma Jones's session. I do have to have a caveat, standard text rates to apply. And also, confidentiality and etiquette. Confidentiality, I don't know who you are, okay? But we are on a college campus, yes? Keep it clean, huh? Because, the boss and the other boss are here, don't make me look bad. All right, we got a couple different kinds of questions. This is answer as many times as you like. So, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back one. Everybody good?
T37607, and I texted Norma Jones threads.
And if your phone doesn't want to work, use a neighbor's. Just, borrow, take it.
37607 is like the phone number that you're texting.
Okay.
That's
And
all.
the-
And the text is,
Yes.
Transgenerational.
Generational challenge. Generational
Yes,
challenge.
millennial.
Okay, I got it. I'm good.
Anybody still? Everybody good? Everybody got the thing? Going once, going twice. All right. So we have a couple different kinds of polls. The first one is a word cloud. Okay, you can answer as many times as you like, one word or multiple words, but you have to hyphenate multiple words. So for example, if I were to ask you, what is your favorite singer band of all time? And you said Queen, I applaud you for your wonderful taste. If you said Lady Gaga, I still like your taste, but maybe not as much as Queen. But you see what you want to do is put the hyphen between, okay? And I do apologize because the school hates my internet. And I had our tech guru here look at it too, so I just didn't screw it up, I promise. So I need to flip back and forth. Usually this is a seamless integration. Okay. So if we go to all right, favorite band and or singers.
Oh, so we tried?
Just send it.
Yeah, go ahead and send those words. One word, hyphenate multiple words. People are still putting Taco Cat?
Yes.
Is Taco Cat an actual?
That's whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
Why are there no country groups up there?
Right, no country, I know.
You
I don't have my phone.
Taco Cat, is that a group?
See? And the more often, if you agree with someone else's answer, if you put it in again, that word will get bigger because apparently someone really likes Taco
There
Cat.
are
I'm looking at you.
other people who like Taco Cat.
Cher? Hey, did you know Cher released an ABBA album?
Cher is amazing.
It is amazing.
It's a
Her-
Broadway musical now.
It is beautiful, and she can't actually move any part of her body except her mouth.
Okay, there's George.
You got George Strait up there.
Okay, Depeche Mode. Nice. Duran, my favorite band of all time. Yes, I am one of those. Does this make sense? All right, I'm going to go ahead and take this one down. AC/DC. Excellent. All right, from there, we also have multiple choice answers, right? One word choice, use the corresponding letter in the slide. So it could be A, B, C, D, yes? This one you can only put one in, okay? Go ahead. None? None? Who did that?
We just put a letter in? Put in a.
Who put none? Out. All right, so if I were to ask you, oh, hang on. I have a handout for you. Aha.
Dr. T. It was none.
I know.
Okay, that's ABC.
Yeah, hang on just a second before I put the poll.
I can do that.
Oh, thank you, sir.
I do. I don't have to.
Get half the class.
So we did the Taco Cat.
You're gonna have to come to my house and
Okay, so once I open up this poll, you'll be able to answer A, B, C, D, right? So generational birth years are on this sheet of paper.
Oh, definition. Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Your cell phone is here.
I left mine out.
I have the hand disease, my
That's one of those where you have to hear the lyrics. You're like, are they really
Yeah,
saying
you really
that?
did. You don't want to hear the words.
So, you identify within the baby boomer birth years, type in A, B for Gen X, C for millennials, D for Gen Z, iGen. Those folks haven't started making enough money for us to give them a call yet.
You only answer one time. So those two days.
So get it right.
Somebody change their mind. Baby boomer.
Why do I feel like we're missing one Gen Z person?
We are.
Put it in there. Oh.
This is baby boomer dad can't do it.
Okay, so we see this, right? So let's consider this is, where we have some similarities and differences. We have different birth years, yes? But how do we, if we haven't experienced something in our lives, how do we know that that existed? How do we know how to deal with it, right? You know, that's one of the things about generations that I think sometimes we kind of don't understand, is I remember those days when you can go to an airport like 20 minutes before your flight and run on. Because security went, yeah, whatever. Okay? How many folks are like, that's never going to happen? Okay? How many millennials are going, yeah, not so much. Don't know what you're talking about, lady. Okay? Also, some of our similarities is we also have really bad names for our generations, right? You know, baby boomers, you are our hippies. Thank you very much. Okay? Gen X. I personally hate that one. Okay? I'm a Gen Xer, but I prefer the term yuppie. Until some jerk by the name of Douglas Copeland decided to write a book about Gen X, about, I think 3 people wandering around the desert around Coachella, aimlessly wondering about their lives. That's how my generation got named. Okay? Millennials prefer emergent professionals, right? Instead of millennial, which is kind of seen as a negative. And then the next group, we don't really know what to call them yet, right? They really haven't made enough money for Pew to actually research them. Okay. So, also one of the funny things about, you guys remember that movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Ted is a boomer by age. Bill S. Preston, Esquire, that guy, boomer, okay? And Gen X, we were called the accelerated culture, right? And millennials and the next generation is like, nah, you guys were slow. Okay, so we have this kind. Now, in our next slide, we're going to be asking you some types of questions that will differentiate what generation you're from and how you feel about something, okay? So, let's see. So if I were to ask you, do you see that on the bottom part where you have your sheets? If I ask you, Queen is the most awesomest, most bestest rock band ever. If you happen to be a boomer, you agree, that's an A. Okay, if you don't agree, that's a B. Okay, if you're a Gen Xer, you agree, that's a C. Don't agree, that's a D. Millennial, yes, E. F for millennials that don't agree, and you're not playing anyway, so.
Oh, Queen. Oh, okay.
Maybe if this is you. I was just wondering, is anybody still playing their class member? Because I was like, yes, I know.
Okay, so how many of us were like actually alive when Queen was around? Right? And they were kind of noisy at times, but they were also kind of a good band. And how many of us actually remember the Live Aid concert versus us seeing it on the new Queen movie, Bohemian Rhapsody? Yeah? That's that difference between experiencing that something phenomenon live versus seeing it somewhere else later. Okay?
But right now, we're all no.
I know, seriously, all of you out. What's wrong?
All of us are no.
I know, this is terrible.
Well, I would have voted yes just so there would be all
All
no.
of us
I
are
voted
listening.
twice.
All of us
I'm gonna vote again so I can let you count your vote.
Tammany Hall.
So a couple things to consider is, the mindset list? Have you guys seen that? Beloit, now it's changed over to Mariest mindset list. Look this up, it's great. It's about incoming freshmen and things incoming freshmen have not experienced. Among their classmates could be Madonna's son, Will Smith's son, David Bowie's son. Okay? You know the rockers that we like? They have kids and they're going to college. Okay? They were the first class who were born in the new millennium who are not millennials. They're now iGen, Gen Z, we're not sure what to call them yet. They've always had Wikipedia. Always, right? Not like our Encyclopedia Britannicas. Okay? People loudly conversing with themselves in public, they don't think they're like talking to themselves. They know they have a phone. Right? For us, we're like, that's all. Also, they've grown up. When their grandparents knew where they were on November 22nd, 1963, what was that? Right. And and their parents were on 9/11, 2001. Okay? They've never experienced either of this. They don't know what Enron is. Okay? Going to the bank? Why? Robert Downey Jr. has always been sober and he's always been Iron Man. Okay? Robots have always been able to walk on two legs and climb stairs. Right? Donnie and Marie who? Okay. Osmond, yes! The Mir space station has always been at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Okay? And films have always been available on the internet. So that's our incoming freshmen. Right? So with that in mind, let me turn it over to our panelists who actually have a clue versus me taking up space.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Jones. We appreciate it. So when we were doing, talking about this forum, we really came across the issue of how do you define a generation? That's a really difficult thing. And I saw a couple people when they had to choose, right? They were like, I don't really fit into this time frame, right? I'm kind of one of those people. I was born in 1984, and so I recently saw actually a comedy special on Netflix, because millennials, that's what we do, we watch Netflix and chill. And so I was watching Netflix, and they said, well, I'm an elder millennial, right? I'm an elder in my generation, because I remember when I got invited to the Facebook, right? It wasn't Facebook, it actually was the Facebook. And you had to have an invite, and you had to be at the university. It wasn't just open to everybody, right? And so it was kind of interesting to kind of try to narrow down, well, how do we define a generation? If I was to ask each of you guys, how do you define a generation? You know, we might all have different answers, right? And so I looked through the literature, and I tried to see, can I find something that is helpful to kind of operationally define a generation? And there are a couple of phrases that I thought were really helpful. The first one was, it's a birth cohort that shares an age, location, and history that has a peer personality. And so that's a really kind of interesting way to think about generations, is we have these peer personalities, and those personalities come out in the classroom, right? Now more than ever, we have classrooms that can have up to those 4 generations. And so then how do we communicate, and how do we think about the world, and what are our experiences in that world? And so Dr. Jones actually did a great job providing you with some examples. So I also had a little age test that I kind of wanted to demonstrate those differences in that peer experience, or that peer personality. So I pulled up an age test picture, and we'll get to it.
Okay.
And these are really fun. These are all over Facebook. And so the goal of the picture is, do you know the connection between the 2 objects in this picture? And you'll answer on your poll everywhere, and we'll see kind of what generation knows the connection between these 2 objects. The first connection picture that we'll pull up is, it's actually a penny and a record player. So what is the connection between a penny and a record player? Okay, and they'll pull up your answers. Yeah, so you'll post your, choose an answer with your poll everywhere. Text your answer. Do you know what the connection is, yes or no?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
Of course not.
There's Dr. O'Meara back there, he knows.
I still have my old memory. I'm old here. Well, it's hyphenated, right? I mean,
Oh, it's
No, you're just doing A, B, C, D.
Yes or no? A or B? No. A,
A or
yes or
B.
B, no.
I need you guys to help me with this.
No.
Yes, no, right? All right, so I'm gonna go with
Yes.
Technology and science.
yes is A, right?
Yes.
Well, let the doctor fool you. Don't let that thing fool you.
All right, so our baby boomers know the connection. Dr. O'Bara, can you tell us what
Sure,
the
the
connection
pen needs
is?
to keep the stylus down. You
Yes.
put the pen on top of the stylus.
Which Jennifer did not know? Which
I had
Jennifer?
no idea. I'm
had no
millennial.
idea.
You had no idea.
I had a record player, but I had.
There you
I
go.
guess mine was a weighted stylus by that point.
You're a modern vinyl listener.
You had an expensive record player.
Exactly.
So I had no idea when I looked this up. I had to go Google it and search for it and figure it out. And yeah, so it was to keep the styles from bouncing up and down and skipping, right? So we have another one. Let's check out the next one. What's the connection? Who knows the connection? I like music, so how to use the music with. Oh, Dr. Rivera knows again.
Click A.
Who knew?
Okay, I'm clicking A. I'm A clicking fool.
The question is, does the Gen Zer know?
Right? Do you know Liam? Does Liam know?
No, she's asking her.
She doesn't know what So Leanne, our Gen Zer, wants to know what the bottom thing is.
He doesn't know his date or something wrong with that.
So I remember this, you know, who knows, who wants to, which Gen Xer said yes, they know. You know.
When it got unspooled, you used the pencil.
Yeah, you use the pen, right, to reel back in, right? And then there's just two more pictures that are just for fun. This isn't part of the poll, but y'all can shout out if you know what it is, what these two things are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
our drive-in library.
Right? Who knows what this is? Over on the right? Drive-in movie theater, right? And then this is fun, right? This is my Google. How many people they're in college, right? Yeah. So these were really fun to go through and kind of look at. And when you look at that, they kind of exemplify those differences, right? They kind of let us realize that we have no idea what Liam's like, I don't know what the cassette is, right? How can I relate to what you're saying or what you're doing, right? And with my own experience. And so when you look at the literature and you look at each of the generations and you see what are the current generations, and we can pull up that next slide, right? And they break them down and they say, well, what is the pure personality of each of these generations in the classroom? What does it look like and how does it look different? And so when we look at baby boomers, a lot of times their self-worth is connected to their work. And so they really enjoy working hard and delving into the schoolwork. And so they might be at this forum for the sake of learning and enjoying it, right? And I like the example of looking at a syllabi. And that's kind of the example I'm going to give is how would each of these generations look at a syllabus differently? And I'm kind of going to open that up to you guys and let you kind of think about it based on some of these differences. How do you think each generation might look at a syllabus differently?
Well, the generation that I teach don't even look at it at all.
Right?
It's
So they might
on a t-shirt, right?
What generation would you say that you're teaching most often?
Well, the most modern ones, the ones that are unlabeled, the Z's or
Gen
the
Z, okay,
new ones, yeah.
right? So some Gen Z maybe doesn't look at it as much as we'd like them to. What else? How would baby boomers differ? What do you think baby boomers, how would they look at a syllabus?
That's a
It's the
contract.
Bible, yeah.
It's a contract.
But the
Right?
syllabus is subject to change.
Well, it
I'm in
is.
grad school right now, it does
Yeah.
not stay the same, right, from one week to the next, I guarantee.
We have to keep them the same here, like once you've given it to the
Yeah.
student, you can change it, but not till the next semester.
Not with a consultant.
Or you can deal with Adam Finley on that one.
The one that I know that changes, she's my age, she's a millennial,
Millennial, okay.
yeah.
So that's kind of interesting, right? So maybe the way a baby boomer writes a syllabus is different than the way a millennial writes a syllabus, right? And so we have to think about that is, well, we're all going to communicate differently, right? How would a Gen Xer look at a syllabi? Yeah, there you go, right? Rip it in half, right? I march to the beat of my own drum, right? They really, Gen Xers, they want things to be straightforward, they want it to be relevant. What's the minimum amount of work that I can pass this class, right? Right, so it's kind of interesting when you look at it. When you look at millennials and Gen Z, this is the generation, right? These are the digital natives. And so for them, well, they can go on YouTube and make 6 figures, right? That's awesome. So they want to know, what am I going to get out of this? And so when they look at a syllabi, they might look at the outcome. What is the outcome of this course? What is it going to teach me? How is it going to help me become an international star, right? How's it going to help me on YouTube or whatever it is job that you want to do? So did we say something? No? Okay. So kind of the thing I want to emphasize is when we're looking at each of these generations and their peer personalities, right, we want to move into, if you can move to the next slide, a growth mindset, right? Both for instructors and for the students, right? Because I know as a millennial, I might not always, the way I perceive the world is different than maybe a baby boomer, and I might have baby boomers in my classroom. And so I have to be aware of that. I really need to make sure that I'm providing them with all the resources that they need to feel successful. At the same time, I also want to engage my digital natives, right? And I want to make sure that I have opportunities for them to engage with technology and to play on their strengths as well. And so when we look at generations, it's really helpful for us to embrace each of their strengths and try to meet those. So Romney's going to talk more about the classroom and how we can engage each of those generations.
Well, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you coming out in the rain and your time about this topic. I find it very interesting. The first time I realized, I was in my classroom and I realized something was off. And I wasn't sure what was going on. And so my slides was going to sort of focus a little bit on what I had seen in the classroom. And so there's been a shift, as most of us are aware of now. But at the time, it was very subtle when it occurred. And I wasn't really sure what was off. But I noticed that when I would go into my class that they weren't talking like they used to talk. They used to, right before class, they kind of have to discuss maybe there was a test or if what we were talking about that day, or they'd missed a day or something. They'd have some sort of discussion, and they didn't talk anymore. They weren't. Well, when I would go in, I didn't perceive it as talking. And what I didn't realize is they really weren't talking. They were talking on their cell phone to the whole world, but they just weren't talking to each other. And maybe they were talking to each other, but they were doing it on their cell phones, and that was really different for me. And I got sort of a group of them up there. I talked with Lee Butler in Student Services, and he informed me that we have had, the oldest person that we've had was 80, and the youngest people we have taught have been up to, I know I had taught a 13-year-old. So that is a wide range of generations, and we had been used to having them in our classroom, the first 3 here, the first few there. We always had those quite for some time now, the millennials basically, and we all kind of got used to how to teach them and everything, and how to deal with them in our classrooms. Well, when the Z's started coming in, and I noticed they weren't really communicating the way that I was used to. The classroom had gotten kind of silent, and they communicate globally, so we know that, can communicate online. But they also, it's kind of interesting because not only do they don't really talk to each other, But they do want to talk to the instructors more. That's what some of the research is saying, more so than, say, some of the millennials did. So that's kind of interesting. So they want to talk to their instructors, and they want to have that sort of that one-on-one. And not necessarily about school, they just want to talk. They just, hey, how are you? How's it going? And I think that's really great because it's sort of bringing a little bit of connection in. But when we think about, I've got to get to my next class, and we talked about, do we have a 15-minute break or do we have a 10-minute break? Having that extra time can be really useful for this next generation because they are going to want to spend a little bit of time talking with you, more so than we've seen before. And then the next thing was the real-world experiences. When you have this many generations, and we just did a little bit of an experiment in here of the knowledge base that we bring. And thank you, Liam, for bringing some of yours. You're only representative today, but it can be so rich when we get a large group of different generations in there. But we do have different types of classrooms. We have the dual credit classrooms, which can look a little bit different maybe than, say, a classroom for nursing or something like that, where we get a little bit older students sometimes. So we can have a pretty wide spread in there. We have to just be aware of who we're teaching and the age of who we're teaching and what kind of generation, but they can bring all kinds of different real-world experiences. I was the first person to teach in the 9th grade center at Weatherford, and they were 14. And I had to teach, we taught a lot using movies, and because they didn't have a lot of real-world experiences. And then some of my other, I've had older students, and they've had great experiences that they can bring. But I remember I had to, one of the ones when I was discussing hypoglycemia, and normally in a normal class, lots of people have some experience. Maybe they had it themselves, maybe they knew someone that had it or something like that. Well, the example that we used in my college, in my class in the 9th grade center was Paul Blart, Mall Cop. And everybody was like, yeah, Paul Blart, I give he's licking the sucker on the But that's the perfect example. I had to try to change up a little bit my examples to fit all of my students. And that's one of the things when we're communicating is the languages that we use too, because some of the definitions and some of the words that we're used to using, we have a whole new generation now that may not know those terminologies, that we have to kind of use a whole bunch of different ways of discussing, whether it's the syllabus. You mentioned the different ways to sort of have that information go across there. Sometimes I write stuff on the board. I send out an email. I verbally tell them. I also put it in Canvas. So I try my best to remind them and get that information across, because there's different ways of communicating that I'm picking up. And if I've got 4 or 5 generations in there, I've got to say it more than one way. So that's my information. And then I also discovered, let me go to, and I don't know if you guys keep it elevated here. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have noticed in your classroom the grade distribution, but traditionally it's always supposed to have been sort of this normal distribution, bell curve. The average was C, and that was another thing that I noticed was that not only was the communication, the room was kind of quiet, but my grades were just bizarre. So I had like all A's, no B's or C's, and then D's and F's. Mm-hmm. That was it. And so I thought, well, that's different. So we had a talk, and I talked to him about it, and I'm serious. I was like, is it me? Because I really did think it was me. And so they were so sweet. I individually set them each down, and I'm like, what do we need to do in all of my classes? And they said, no, it's us. And I said, okay. So I said, okay, well, what was going on? And they talked about motivation, and they talked about expectation, and what they expected the test to be like, which we're going to have all kinds, people coming in from high school that are going to expect that they've been able to, they know how to study, they got this, they've been doing it for a while. And then we have older traditional students that think, I'm in school and I'm not sure, I haven't been here in a while, I kind of forgot. So you get all kinds of different expectations and motivation too for the grade distribution, but I told them, I said, well, let's work on it. And so they did, and so throughout the semester, we would get, you wanna?
Next slide, sure.
The next thing I got was that. And that's trimodal. So I had all A's, I had no B's, and I had C's, and no D's, and I had non-passing grades. And I said, oh, okay, it's a little better, right? But I told them not to do that again. And we worked hard. I said, look, you're getting close, but let's come on. And then they gave me this. This is an actual distribution. It's uniform. So I had the same number of A's, B's, C's, and D's. No F's, so I felt it was a success. I was like, yes! So what I've decided, let me go to the next one, that perhaps we need to relook at this idea of a traditional, grade distribution.
Great, it's hilarious.
I don't know that's going to be relevant anymore, especially when we get our dual credit classes. We can have a highly skewed distribution, especially in some of the classes where we have nursing and things like that, where C is failing almost. So you're going to have these distributions, and maybe when we get all of our generations in there, this doesn't quite apply anymore. So I think I've got one more. Oh, about, this is my last one. Get over it real quick so we can let other ladies talk. This one's over technology and collaboration and cheating and imitation. Really, it's just sort of a discussion. I have some poll things in here, but before we get to that, I just want to say how very happy I am, I don't know if that's the right word, but of how the polling has gone so far, because I know for me, technology is really not my thing. I'm not really good at it. I'm the one that didn't bring their phone. I like presenting, I don't need my phone. So I didn't bring my phone, and you can ask my students, and I get in there and I try really hard to infuse it into the classroom, but it's difficult. And then someone mentioned technological anxiety, and I think that's a really good terminology too, because as we try to grasp and bring in our technological students, which are the Generation Z, we have to remember that we have some older, non-traditional students that may have difficulty with some of these new things that we bring in. And so I really enjoyed having you do this, Norma. I know it wasn't quite to what you want to know, but it was great. I thought it was wonderful because it's a really good example of, as we incorporate new technologies into our classrooms, we have to think about all the generations that it's serving, not just that first one. So here's a couple of questions that we're going to do involving technology, because we are going to have to get some of it in here. It's just going to happen. Because as we move into the next 150 years of Weatherford College, we're going to have to pick some stuff up here. So these are just some of the ways we do online classes. So this would be, I'd like to know what the students' preferences are here. So this would be whether we're teaching it or whether we're taking it. Which ones do we have here? So most people like it. Man, that's a pretty significant difference there for X. Do you guys remember what we said about X? What was one of the things that X liked, though? What was one of their things that April brought up that the X's really prefer?
Straightforward, do it on their own time, right?
I got it. I can do it. I'm doing it. I have a lot of latchkey kids on their own, study on their own, no parents, get your own food, figure out how to get in the house, and I can do it myself.
for that one.
Romney, the question is, are people answering this question based on how they perceive the students will answer them, or are they
answering it for themselves? I think you guys are answering for yourselves, right?
As a student or as a teacher?
Like
Well,
first, if I was a student, I would prefer
Answer
to be like.
So you answered it for
Yeah.
yourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, I answered it as a student.
Oh, okay, so how many did it as a student?
I did.
Okay, all right, and then as a teacher or instructor or student?
Yes.
So about
Some of the instructors.
all right, so we'll see how the next one goes. another one here, so it's, I believe it's hybrid. Sorry. It's okay. I've asked some of my students about the hybrid, and some of the students that I've been talking to, the Z's, seem to prefer more one-on-one face-to-face class, or face-to-face. They seem to like that a little bit better. That's something we may want to look at and see if that's something that continues to hold true the further they go. Even the hybrid, they didn't like it as much. They told me, they said, I need to go to class.
Do
So
you want to wait for their poll before you give your opinion?
Oh, there it is.
No.
Oh, that's
Okay, so are we gonna answer this one as a student or a teacher?
This is where you're in class and online. like
As a
online.
student.
Is it really different? I mean,
It is. Do I prefer teaching an online
Right.
course, or do I prefer taking?
okay.
Is it different?
It's
I mean,
two
it's
different
different
For
questions.
me, I,
It's two completely different questions.
Yeah, that's two completely different questions.
You may answer the question twice. One as a student, how you perceive the students, and the other one
Oh,
the
that's
way
a
you
good
play.
idea. Yeah.
Okay, if you want to answer twice, that'd be great.
I just think, just keep it simple. If you want me to show up, I'll show up. If you want to do this online, do this online.
So, what we got here? What are some of the reasons why you guys like the hybrid?
So I put that I was the millennial who said no to the online class. And I said yes to the hybrid because I don't mind doing some of it online, but I still like the face-to-face, the getting to know my instructor, knowing the students I'm working with, especially the number of online classes I've had in my grad program. They all have a group project, and that's the word. It said earlier that millennials like group projects. I don't. I hate it, especially when it's with people that I've never even met before. I don't feel like I ever really connect with the other students in my class.
Are you between like Gen X, like right on that?
I'm on the cusp.
On the cusp, so that's
Yeah.
kind of, indicative of being right there between Gen X and millennial, right?
And that brings up a really good point. We talk about collaboration, and that's a really big word, and that's what some of the students really seem to like, but not all of them like that. And they want to work on their own and be more independent. So hybrid seems to be doing pretty good there, so I guess that's good. Maybe better than online. I can't remember what online was. And then our last one is the face-to-face. Should I move that down? I really want to. Maybe I could have time for you guys to talk. I think that's. I have a couple more, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Sure, do you want?
Wow, that's interesting.
That is
Yeah.
very
Remember when I was
interesting.
mentioning that you
Okay, Gen X, we're just schizo.
I mean, if I can get everything done at my own pace and to show up somewhere,
Face-to-face all the way.
So let's get to the next.
Yeah, so let's do the cell phone. So the last one, we'll just talk a little bit about cell phone. We gotta get Adrianne and
Yeah,
Cheryl in here. They have some
let's get
issues.
Adrianne moving quickly.
Cell phone in the classroom?
Get Adrianne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, okay.
Okay, so I am taking a totally different approach, I think, than the first two presenters. And my focus is on, so what do you do? What do you do to connect with these students? And what I've noticed is because we teach at a community college, we have a very broad spectrum of the people we're trying to engage with. So I think I'm going to kick it way back to the Greeks and go with the Socratic Method, and also I know that I know nothing. And what I would argue, this sounds really mean, but it's nice. Demonstrate their ignorance and model ignorance. So ask questions instead of get up and being the sage on the stage. You're going to be the facilitator. In fact, there's this great quote, if I can just share it with you, and it's about Socrates. Socrates, as a teacher, is a midwife. He does not himself bring forth truth, but rather by means of questioning causes and the learner to rationally apprehend or give birth to, as it were. Truths were already gestating within. So in other words, you're facilitating, you're there bringing that forward. Now, I think probably enough of you guys have worked with our students, especially the younger students, that you know that I can Google, therefore I know. I can Google, I don't need you, because I can go to YouTube and learn it, and I can go to Wikipedia, and I don't need you. So you are irrelevant to me, right? So we need to show one thing, and that is ignorance. They do know some things better than we do. First of all, they're digital natives. I'm not a digital native. I can hold my own, but I consider it a win when it's not user error or if there's a problem. It's not me. Thank God. Okay, so what I want you to think about is demonstrating. If a student asks you a question, instead of saying, I need to be the figurehead with all the answers, you say, I don't know, but let's find out. That when you approach discovery in more of a childlike way, you're more likely to infect that kind of behavior, okay? So instead, you flip the classroom. We've all heard this. So let's go to the next one. I have two little projects that I do. One is the tree octopus. Now let me read you a very disturbing statistic. 73% of search engine users say that most or all the information they find through search engines is accurate and trustworthy. And 66% of users regarded search engines as fair and unbiased sources of information. Okay, let's talk about search engines. First of all, how many students do you have that bring their own devices with them? Most of them do, right? They have their own laptop, they have their phones, they have their iPads or whatever, tablets. Algorithms. Everything that they've searched before is actually harnessing what they will find based on those algorithms. So it's almost like an echo chamber. They're getting the information, they're going to get hits. Their information is going to hit based on what they've already previously searched. It isn't just all equal, right? It's not like you just go and you do a Google search and it has no bias. Your search history gives it bias. And they don't realize that, and they don't think about that. So if they are, let's just say, a conservative student, if they tend to go to conservative websites, they're tending to get conservative information. If they go to a website and they're liberal and more liberal side, they tend to get more liberal information. Okay. So you go in there, you're gonna have, I'm gonna use spectrums here. You have, let's just say, your baby boomers. I've actually had senior citizens. I had a formerly sequestered nun who was a senior citizen in one of my classes. True story. Then you have the very young kids who are very good digital natives. Now I'm going to stereotype, and so forgive me, there are exceptions as always. But my baby boomers are often coming back to school. They maybe finished high school and they raised some kids, or they lost their job and they're getting retrained, and they don't have a lot of confidence, especially as it relates to technology, right? Then you have the digital natives. They're like, if I can Google it, I can get an answer, right? And they're very confident. So how do you make both of those populations feel comfortable in one classroom? You flip it, okay? Here's what I do. Tree octopus, okay. Before we get to the tree octopus, I'll tell you what I ask them to do. I get the whiteboard, I get my marker, and I say, tell me, when you're doing a search, how do you know that the material that you're finding is valid? Tell me what criteria you use when you hit that website. You can say, well, they're experts, expert testimonies. If it's scientific, it uses Latin names. If there's maybe source material, the year it was published or posted is also going to help us, right? So that I make them do an extensive list. Say, this is the stuff I look at, so I know that when I Google it and I find a source, it's valid, okay? So then after I have all that set up, you've got the digital natives going, and I do this, and I do this, and you've got the other side going, I just hope that it looks good, right? And so you go, okay, so meanwhile, the people who are less confident are still getting stuff. The people who are very confident are going, I got this. I got this. And then I bring up the tree octopus. The tree octopus was created to be a very realistic looking website. And actually, you can click on that link. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. This is really not a tree octopus. But what is interesting is all of that criteria that those digital natives have told me to determine whether that website is valid or not get ticked off. So what I've just shown them is, hey, all that criteria that says this is a valid source. We have a valid source, there's a tree octopus, correct? So when you analyze something, this is a very distilled take on it. But I tell my students when you analyze or evaluate something, you want something that supports your interpretation or your position. They have that, right? They have all these things. You want to make sure there's nothing that contradicts it. That's the part, the analytical part that they struggle with sometimes. So here are these digital natives saying, wow, okay, there really is no tree octopus, but the criteria I've been using is telling me it should be right. And then you have, on the other side, the group of students who are less confident saying, oh, those little smarty pants, they thought they knew it all, and they don't, but hey, I learned something too. Okay? This isn't something that you have to do, but if you go down, like this even has, like if you'll scroll down just a bit, it has maps. Keep going. They have a video of an actual tree octopus. They have like made up magazine covers about how they were collected and they were almost extinct because people were wearing them in their hats. They have, you know, just all sorts of doctor stuff. It's very thorough. Has links to all these different sites, credible like biologists and things like that. But it's all fraud. But it holds up based on the criteria that they've identified. So you've just demonstrated their ignorance. And you've done so in sort of a gentle way, right? That it's
there's one, just as a note, there's one for history like that. If anybody in here teaches history, have your students evaluate the Hitler Historical Museum.
Yes. Okay.
It's an anti-Holocaust, Holocaust denial site, but everything on the front says we are a non-biased source using professors who come in and talk about Hitler and all that type of stuff. And you go and you click on links, and one of the first things on there is the hoax of the 20th century, the Holocaust, you know, but
that's what I tell my students.
It sounds like, you know, it sounds like a legitimate,
and that's exactly right.
The Hitler Historical Museum.
That's exactly right. And so what you want to do is just chip away at their confidence about it, not in an aggressive, you're an idiot sort of way, but rather say, it could be that you have a lot of information, but how do we pull this in and take it in as knowledge, or how do we know? So the other thing I do is this quiz, and this is just a quiz. It's just a quiz, right? I tell them exactly what to study. I'm very prescriptive. Say, we're going to have that quiz, say, on Tuesday. And I want you to be prepared. You look at these lectures. You look at this chapter of your book. You do it all. But what I do was you have this time the baby boomers or the older students tend to do well. I can study. I know how to study. I can look at my book. I can put my flags in my folders, everything. The other side is like, hey, if I look over the material, it's good. What I do is I have them take a quiz, but I'm not quizzing them on the material in the book. This is shocking. I'm quizzing them on application of the material, and they don't like it because they just want to say A, B, C, D, whatever. This is, okay, which one of these is an incorrect version of MLA citation? So they have to know the rules and apply the rules. And I do kind of a lengthy quiz. And then I know they're going to do badly. I already know this. What they don't know is this isn't for a grade. So I finished the quiz and I was like, tell me how you feel about this quiz. It was harder. It probably was. Why was it harder? Well, I thought we were just going to answer questions like, where do you put your period at the end of the sentence or whatever. Because a lot of the lecture material doesn't focus specifically on applying. So then I'll say, well, if you could do this again, what would you do differently? I would try to plug it in a little bit more, right? Okay, so go do that. We're throwing this one out. This wasn't the actual quiz. I have two different versions. And then I'll run another one that's almost identical but different examples or whatever, and they do well on it. What I've shown them is you think you know, but you really don't know. And you kind of come across as, you know, the good guy if they don't think too hard about it. Because it's kind of like a Jedi mind trick. Here's your quiz, here's your quiz. But they are relieved. And then the other thing that I've done in the past is when we're talking about stuff like MLA, it's about mastery of the material. So let's just say they start studying that quiz and they don't do as well as they want. Am I here to get a grade from them, or am I here to get them to learn the material? I will open it up and say, you have until this time, you can retake it as much as you want. Take it until you get it right. But I also have questions that are identical, but they cycle in and out. So it's not ever going to be the same quiz. It's the same application of material, but it's not the exact same quiz. So they can keep taking it over and over. And I open it up. Why? Because I'm more concerned with them understanding the material, how to apply it, than I am about collecting a grade and walking away saying, do better next time. And this gets them to realize, okay, I understand how she works. I understand what I need to do now. And I usually do a quiz like this at the beginning of the semester, and I don't do a lot of quizzes, but it sets the stage for, this is about us getting there, not about me going gotcha. So, ignorance is important. The last thing I'll say is when you're willing to make yourself vulnerable, I think it's really important for us as instructors, instead of being seen as this person at the top of a pillar of this knowledge, people don't always respond well to somebody coming from on high saying, here's how it is. I think what's really more important is igniting a fire instead of filling a vessel, making them want to learn and showing them, hey, I don't know the answer to that. I don't mind saying that. I don't know. Let's see if we can find out. And I think you get good buy-in, and it doesn't really matter what generation you're talking about. They want to see you be real. Yeah, Cheryl. Sorry.
Right. Well, I'm bringing the
Take your time. Yeah.
Okay. They were supposed to run out of time, so I yeah. Thanks a lot. So I'm actually going to bring in the technical part of it. There are a lot of tools out there that you can use for different types of learning. We know that our kids love their phones. The ones that are coming up, they just love those phones. Not so much the older people in the classroom. I get sometimes, get that whole, cell phone. My husband has a flip phone. Okay. So we have to make sure that we're reaching them, but we're also not cutting somebody out. So there are a lot of different tools out there that are actually free that you can utilize in your classroom. I know that one of the tools that I have up here is being used, or two of them actually are being used by people that are actually in this room. But for group applications, there's something called GroupMe. It's a free tool. It's a way to enable your students to have a group chat that is just that group. It doesn't, they can't invite anybody else into it. It's just they get assigned a group, and that's the group they stay in. And you can encourage them to use that throughout the semester. They can start their own group chats if they want to once they're in the program, but as an instructor, you can assign them to a group and they can work that in a chat room. We did enable the chat feature in Canvas. We did find that it was actually not very functional because it's based on a classroom. So this one, it goes outside the classroom. They don't have to be in Canvas to use it, and it really, really works well. And this is one that comes up a lot at some of our conferences, is the GroupMe. The second one is Trello. It's similar, only Trello was actually developed for Agile programming. Agile programming is stand and deliver. A bunch of guys get into a room, they start chatting, they start working stuff out. They use whiteboards, they use lists, they have sticky notes. Somebody put that into an application, and now this is what they use for their stand and deliver, their Agile programming. It is basically where you can set up, it's based on grouping as well. You put them into a group as a team. They learn team dynamics. they learn how to assess the project, they learn how to make schedules, and they learn how to post things up on the board as they're going through. They have a regular set of criteria that they need to finish. So this is a really good tool to teach to students, especially if they're going on into the business world, because this is really applicable. This is something they're going to be doing once they get out there. Interactive video has become just the bomb for classrooms. I know that Scott uses Screencast-O-Matic quite exclusively in his classroom to videotape his lectures. It is a free product if you want to tape, I think it's 15 minutes. The actual subscription version for teachers, if you go out there and say, hey, I'm an educator, is like $40 a year. And that gives you editing possibilities. You can cut, you can paste, you can scrunch it down, you can time it, you can actually put subtitles in it, and then it's supposed to generate its own little, I forget what they call it, but it's supposed to generate a piece of
Closed
paper.
captioning.
Yeah, the closed captioning information. It's supposed to generate that automatically, but it's here or there, but it's like hit and miss. It's just like any of them that do it. You still have to have some human intervention in it. But it is very, very useful for even just those, I've turned a lot of instructors onto it just for that introduction. Kids love the classroom that has here I'm your teacher and here's my introduction, and I've started noticing on some of the Canvas pages that is becoming widely popular. Hi, I'm such and such and so and so. I'm teaching this class this semester. Here's what I require, those kinds of things, and it seems like it's a touch point. The student gets to actually, especially for online or hybrid, they get to see that person's face and they get to actually identify with an individual in the classroom. We saw Poll Everywhere today for quick checks. Poll Everywhere also has a component called iClicker. We do have a group on campus that is using iClicker, and I can't remember if it's radiology or if it's physical therapy, but they do use it in the classroom, and it's a learning tool that is used to determine whether they're getting the concept. So they flash a little poll on the screen, and the kids use this iClicker. They use their cell phones, but they use the iClicker to really speak back to the teacher. And then that way, they can either adjust the lecture materials, go back if they need to, especially if the concepts are really not being absorbed. And that's something that's super important in healthcare. You don't want to skip over something and then find out 2 weeks later, oh wow, they didn't get that. Not what we want. Cahoots are so popular today. And a Kahoot is just really it's gamifying the classroom, I'm gonna say it. But it is a lot of fun. I use them in my classroom, or I've tested them in my classroom, and the kids thought they were crazy. I tutor a fifth grader this year. They use Kahoots every day in her classroom here in the Weatherford School District. Kahoots are they're just a bundle of fun. Even if you don't want to create your own, there are thousands of them already prepared out there that you can use. But they're easy to create, and April uses those in her classrooms.
What are they? I missed that concept.
You missed it. It's basically you go out and you put like a quiz online. It can be anything from just words, you can put pictures in it, and then you send that quiz out to a group, and they can compete with each other. Groups can compete with each other. Students can compete with other students. And then you can get kind of an idea. It's a really good way to get your kids working together. If you're having problems, kind of getting your students to work with each other, it's a really good tool to get them stimulated to work with each other. Because I had one student that was bombing the Kahoot every single time. The other two weren't even looking at it, and I shot him an email and said, y'all have cell phones? You know, because this is here, I need you to go out and test it. Told you at the beginning of class, you're gonna be guinea pigs for a lot of stuff. This is the time you need to get out there and test this stuff. And once they did, they just went nuts. They loved it, you know, it was great. And the feedback that I got from them was really, really good. So it can be applied to just about every classroom, really. And they're fun. Socrative it's a little bit similar to Kahoots. It's basically It's more of a question answer type thing. And when we went to TXDLA, I think it was a year ago, and somebody from one of the campuses down south presented it. And it really is, it's really super useful when that's all you want to do, is you want to get them studying something. You put it out there, it's like that practice quiz type stuff. You want to get them studying, you want to really invite them into and getting them used to studying for things. And that's basically what Socratic is. It's free for a trial version, but it is a pretty expensive tool, so I'm not sure it would fly here if we had to have a license, a site license. Video lectures, like I said, Screencast-O-Matic is really good. I forgot the Edu-Creations and Edu-Puzzles. If you have time, sometime this summer, if you just want to goof around, I would go look at both Edu-Creations and Ed-Puzzles. Ed-Puzzles, you can take a video, it can be something that you've created yourself, you can stop the video, you can add questions to it, and then start the video again. And it's just really, really neat. It's something that we would normally have to sit down with Adobe and sit there and really play and play and play to get it to work, and it just does it all online, and you're just working with it from there. You don't have to use your own videos. There are thousands of videos out there on TED Talks and things like that that you can use. Just be really sensitive to your audience. The other one is Edu-Creations. Now, Edu-Creations is more of a, if your students are in front of you and you're demonstrating something, you can have an iPad with with like a pen, and you can have a diagram on the Edu-Creations, and you can be labeling things and record that lecture as you're labeling, and students are asking you questions, you're actually recording everything that you're doing. It also comes in a tutorial version, but the price, then it kicks out and you have to have a subscription to use it. A lot of these things we're not using, we don't have licenses here on campus. You know how hard it is to get technology. Yeah, we're going to change that. But we have talked, I've talked to Dr. Ebe, and we think what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and plug in some of the instructors that are using tools like this on a monthly, more of a monthly basis, to just say, come and see how this works. Look at how I use it. So that we can get that out to them so that they can say, okay, Screencast-O-Matic, wow, this is the bomb. I could do this. And it's real simple. It's not something that they need to sit through a 3-hour class to learn how to use. It's just a click of a button and dragging that screen over to what you want to record, and you're off. So we'd like to do that. Yes?
Yeah, all of the library's tutorials are done with Screencast-O-Matic because it was free. I mean, yes, you know, Elizabeth had to kind of practice her way through because we got the free version, so you couldn't stop and edit it. But all of and they launched, you have no issues with them. We've never heard anybody have a problem with the format. Whatever they were accessing, it loads up great on our website for that. And all she needed was just to plug in a traditional microphone for that and recorded all of them on her office computer. So I'm definitely vouch for the Screencast-O-Matic. Dead simple way to do it, and the audio quality was fine. The video quality's been fine.
Yeah, I've got about 30 of them up in my classroom, and I didn't even plug in a microphone.
Really?
It's on the MacBook Pro. It's just that camera and the microphone on it, and it sounds great straight through it.
Does that eliminate the need to get Camtasia? Because I just got a quote for Camtasia.
Yes.
It's $279.
And Camtasia, you can vouch for Camtasia. Can't you use it a little bit? You don't. No. Okay. Camtasia is one of those, you need to sit in a class for several days to learn how to use it. It's not for the faint of heart.
And it's available at the library in our little media room.
It's in the media room out there.
So you wouldn't have to buy it. If you want to try it on campus, that's over, we have a little recording studio there in the library. Yes, it's Camtasia that's loaded on there for any faculty, staff to come from.
So please taste and see first before you have that thing loaded onto your system, because it's a $300 subscription?
Yeah, it is.
And you can get Screencast-O-Matic for free, and it's unlimited. You can record as many videos as you want. They don't care. They really don't. I've done real quick, down and dirty, this is how you do this. stuff for a lot of people just in seconds on Screencast-O-Matic and send it out. It's question, set it up, get it done, send it out like 15 minutes.
Excellent, thanks.
So it's really easy to use. If you ever have questions about any of this technology, you can contact me. We are going to advocate pretty heavily for some things that we've seen recently at some of the conferences. We love Zoom. We've been turned down, and I think that we're going to lobby pretty heavily for that. Skype has been rolled into something called Microsoft Teams, and it's more than 3 clicks, I gotta tell you right now. And that's what they're encouraging us to use. So I would just encourage you to reach out and just, if there's something that you're interested in, get in touch with me. We can do research. I can pretty much install anything on my computer so I can test it. So if you have any questions about technology, please don't hesitate, especially if it works with Canvas. These are all things that actually work with Canvas very well. So we want to make sure that you're using things that are compatible and that people can get to, and they're reliable, and they're easy.
I can also say Integrity is one of those.
Integrity, yes.
Yes, I use Integrity, so I also want to throw that in there.
Nice.
Yes. Just before we completely run out of time, I need to just summarize a few things that have been said here today. We talked about adaptive teaching as well as adaptive learning. Those two things we talked about today. Just on a quick note, adaptive teaching is a concept of achieving a common instructional goal with diverse learners with different aptitude or learning style. Whereas adaptive learning is incentivized learning by associating it with fun, such as technology, as we've heard all day long, technology. So technology has made adaptive learning more fun by captivating learners of all ages with tools that is appropriate or effective to their learning style. So in one of the conferences that, one of the sessions I attended this last week in a conference I was in, somebody reiterated that educational technology is dynamic and we must continue to adapt to the changes that goes with it. It's not a question of are you going to use them or not. You must use them in the classroom. And just one more thing in terms of redefining what some of the, I believe Romney Landis touched on this a lot. The two major approaches cited by adaptive teaching are remediation approach, one, and number two is compensatory approach. The remediation approach is proactive in nature, where the learners are provided with prerequisite knowledge or skills, okay, such as student-centered discussion, things like Q&A, and I believe Adrianne touched on that as well. But compensatory approach is reactive in nature, compensating for lack of basic knowledge or skills among learners by providing more learning resources and activities to help them to learn. So those two things can be incorporated, those two approaches can be incorporated into the same classroom setting. So that is not to say that adaptive learning or adaptive teaching cannot be equated or mischaracterized as individualized or differentiated teaching. Those are different things. So in adaptive teaching, you have diverse group of learners in one setting, in one classroom, and you apply all the various measures of remediation as well as the compensatory approach to reach them, achieve your goal. And this is the 21st century teaching. It's something that is evolving. We as instructors must evolve to adapt to those type of students that we are getting. So that being said, I will say thank you so much to our panel for a job well done, please. Thank you all for showing up. And again, when we return back next academic session, remember, if it is the last Monday of the month, it is the Dean's Forum. Thank you very much.